A lot of people like to say that Sans is probably the worst character in the game right now, not from being a unfun to fight perspective, but more so him being apparently underpowered. Sans has had a lot of history throughout UCR, being the second oldest character in the roster and going from objectively the strongest character in the game pre-rework to now being on the lower end of the character meta, whatever you prefer to call it. Despite being weak, I do actually have a lot of praise for his design. However, I do think some things need to be changed, which I'll talk about if you stay for a long-term answer. If you want a short-term answer though, maybe. He sort of lacks some of the tools needed to properly be a zoner, and his damage output on his bones is simply way too low for him to be any use without blasters. Unlike other characters where most of the time they usually have most of their kit at their disposal, Sans needs blasters to use a good chunk of his kit, so if he doesn't have any blasters, he suffers majorly. Some of his moves also throw himself forward, which isn't exactly what a zoner wants. If you're looking for a long-term answer, or maybe a more in-depth answer, I'll quickly go over his kit as per usual so you can get a feeling for how he plays. Timestamps will be displayed in a few seconds if you just want to skip over to a certain aspect of the video. Sans spawns in with about 80 health. He has a higher stamina consumption than the average class, being only able to run for a total of 6 seconds, while needing 5.5 seconds to fully regen his mana as well. Sans is also one of the few characters to not have any passives. However, he has two important gimmicks which I will go over right now. The first gimmick is blasters, and these are very essential for him, as without these blasters he's locked out of a large majority of his kit, that being his blasters mode. He can acquire these blasters from using his blasters 1 interrupted or landing his blasters 2. Each blaster lasts 60 seconds, however it can be damaged by projectiles too. Sans can use these blasters to tank projectiles as well. The second gimmick is called the grounded mode. Essentially, this move allows Sans to have more control over the fight. This changes some of his moves to be stronger or have a variant. This grounded move can also be applied when hitting his anti-air or landing his melee counter. More information on these two gimmicks later, as they'll sort of be more relevant as I explain it in the moves. Sans has 20 moves excluding any variants. Sans also lacks an LMB unless the opponent has the grounded mode. Sans has a melee counter, however lacks a projectile counter. Sans also lacks an ultimate as well. Sans is one of the only characters to have no super armor on any of their moves, aside from telekinesis too. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's talk about his actual moveset. I'll be skimming through these and briefly mentioning the more important ones rather than the filler moves. Bones Air 1. Sans jumps into the air forward and fires a large bone below the opponent. If the enemy is grounded, Sans will fire up to 3 available blasters. Bones 2. Sans swings his right arm and fires bones right in front of him. If the opponent is hit, they'll be knocked back. If Sans has a blaster, it'll teleport you on top of the blaster so you can use another aerial move. Bones 3. Sans raises his arm before a wave of bones fire forward. If you get hit by this move, you'll get knocked back to the end of the wave. This breaks block and up to level 2 super armor. This move will also try to predict the opponent's movement. Air Bones 4. Sans raises his right arm and summons a swarm of large bones to fire at the opponent. This move can be held. The more it's held, the more bones will fire. If the opponent has grounded, it'll be blue bones instead. Blasters 1. Summons a blaster. This is mainly how you acquire your blasters if you can't land blasters 2. Air Blasters 1. Fires a blaster at the opponent while in the air. Blasters 2. Sans fires a small explosion of energy forward. This breaks block and up to level 1 super armor. If the opponent is hit by it, it will summon a blaster. Blasters 3. Sans throws a blaster towards the opponent. If the opponent is hit, the blaster will break. If not, the blaster will fire a beam towards the opponent. You can use other attacks while this beam fires. Blasters 4. Sans positions a blaster above him, which will charge before firing at the opponent. This breaks block and level 1 super armor. Finally, we have Blasters 5. Similar to Dark Lord, where he basically has control of a Virobot. You can move this blaster around with WASD. The opponent is not locked onto the blaster. By pressing LMB, your blaster will automatically fire. When firing the blaster, your camera will be switched to another blaster to do it all over again. If no blasters are off firing cooldown, you will exit this mode. You can also press Z to switch in between blasters. It'll prioritize the blasters without a firing cooldown. Getting hit while using this move will automatically cancel the move. However, you have a few extra moves while using this. Pressing F while in this mode will make the blaster move quickly in front of Sans. Pressing 1 will reset the blaster's aerial position to the ground level, and pressing 2 will make the blaster chase the opponent before firing. Telekinesis 1. This is Sans' melee counter. Getting hit by the melee counter will not damage you, however it will give the opponent grounded for 10 seconds. It will also fully restore Sans' mana and stamina to maximum. If you hold W, you can activate a special variant that activates a cutscene. However, even if the blaster is missed, the cutscene version will go on cooldown. Telekinesis 2. Sans will swap position with a nearby blaster. If Sans does not have a blaster, he will simply stay where he is. If the enemy is grounded, you will instead switch places with the enemy and knock them to the ground. Telekinesis 3. This is Sans' anti-air. Essentially, he will fire its telekinetic power into the sky. Getting hit by this will apply the grounded effect for 30 seconds. This also has a really huge hitbox. If you've been looking at the images provided for some of the moves I went over, you may notice that a fair chunk of his moves involve moving forward, which can be beneficial depending on the situation. However, in certain aspects, this can also be really bad. For example, if he's fighting against a rushdown, that distance that he eliminates could lead to him being hit into a combo. This is not a bad thing in itself, as Sans is a zoner that gets rewarded for giving up space. However, for him to give up this space, he also needs to create this space, which is why moves that push him forward can make him suffer a bunch in trying to achieve this goal of creating space. His Blasters mode is actually really good. I don't think it needs much changes from Blasters 3, which I'll suggest my changes in the kit suggestion part. The main problem with his blasters that I can see is his inconsistent summoning and keeping his blasters. Right now, Sans doesn't really have a fleshed out kit if you take away his blasters. Because of this, not having blasters as Sans is a huge crutch. If the opponent is a zoner or plays passively, he also suffers majorly because one of the key ways to get his blasters is locked behind him having to approach the enemy and hitting them for a blaster. If he has to approach to get his blasters against a passive player or a fellow zoner, that can lead him to be in a very bad position. Now about Blasters 3 though, this move breaks his own blasters, which is very essential for him to have. In some cases, it's actually better to just never use this move, or if you're the opponent, intentionally get hit by it, since it eliminates one of his key resources. His grounded mode and telekinesis mode are both really well designed though, as it gives Sans a way to set up distance or have more control over the fight. Sans also sort of lacks that defense that he used to have. During pre-work, Sans could use a move similar to Airbone's 1. However, instead of it disappearing, it would stay there, which gave him options to use as a defense tool against projectiles, or use it as a block. Sans can do these things with blasters, however it's harder to do as that requires setup with Blasters 5, or just hoping that your blasters are in a good position. Depending on the situation and distance with Sans, you might not have the time to properly set up that defense with blasters. Overall, I would say Sans suffers from a lack of defensive moves, inconsistent summoning, and moves breaking his blasters intentionally, which is a very vital resource for him. I will mostly be providing solutions about distance-related problems with Sans, as well as giving him some sort of setup defense. I'll be providing some reasoning behind the suggestion, as well as providing examples of how they can be utilized. I'm no Sans player, so this is kind of my own attempt at fixing this. Firstly, Bones moves that push you towards the enemy like Air 1 or Air 3 would have an S and W variant. Holding S will make Sans launch backwards, and holding W will make them launch forward. This is so that Sans can have the option to create some distance, but also have the option to eliminate distance if he wants to use some of his other moveset. Secondly, after using Air Bones 1 or Bones 3, the bones will not disappear until 5 to 7 seconds have passed. These bones will also have collision for both parties. This is so that Sans can establish a proper defense against projectiles without having to have blasters in the way. In Air Bones 1 case, if the S variant was added, you can now use this move to block attacks. You can also use this move as a way to get your blasters from Blasters 1 summoned a bit more safely. This bone would break after taking 2 to 3 damage from any attacks. In Bone's 3 case, this would act as a wall. Any move that deals over 0.5 damage will instantly break one of the walls. Next, Bones 2 would also get an S and W variant. Holding W while using this move will knock the opponent in the normal direction, while the S variant will knock the opponent away from you. This offers a way for Sans to create some distance, however makes it so that any combos with the current Bones 2 can still be done. Fourthly, hitting the opponent with the melee part of Blasters 3 will no longer break the blaster. Instead, it will now clamp the enemy with its jaws. This will deal the same amount of damage as it currently does. When the opponent is clamped down, Sans can now move the blaster using WASD. This gives him the opportunity to create a good amount of distance. Sans cannot move while the opponent is clamped down, and the enemy will break free after a second or two. Finally, while the opponent is grounded, Sans has the option to choose to not use the Blue Bones variant from Air 4. Holding S while using the move will disable the Blue Bones variant. You may have noticed that during the suggestion aspect of the video, most of these changes aren't related to his damage or such. More so, they're just meant to be to give Sans an option to create that distance he might need as a zoner. I am no Sans player, so I can't speak on exactly what needs to be changed regarding his damage values or whatnot, so they were mainly meant to be minor adjustments that could make him a bit more effective. You could also look at some of the Sans suggestions, and I'm sure you'd find a direction for his balancing. I mainly wanted to go over his distance problem, though. Overall, though, right now, his moves forcefully moving him forward makes it really hard to get any sort of distance, which most likely makes Sans suffer. But to answer the title of this video, probably. I mean, there's, like, Nakami, I think. But, anyways, subscribe, like, comment. You should comment and like. You should subscribe. Also, if the owner is watching, can I have pacifist, please? Remu, Martial Arts, Nakami, Edo, Sid, Takia, Charles, X-Event, Sans, Flowey, Glitch Okara, or Spamton.